The unexpected invitation. Mrs. Lillian Hawthorne was not just another successful entrepreneur. She was a formidable force in the corporate world, known for her razor-sharp intellect and unyielding determination. Following the untimely passing of her husband, Charles, she had seamlessly taken the reins of Hawthorne Enterprises, the company they had built together from the ground up. Her late husband had often joked that they were two halves of a whole, and after his death, she felt as though that whole had been shattered. Despite her success, the large estate they had shared felt like a mausoleum, echoing with the memories of laughter and love that once filled its halls. While the company flourished under her leadership, Mrs. Lillian felt increasingly isolated. The office buzzed with the sounds of ambition and the chatter of employees, yet she found herself distanced from the very people who admired her. They looked up to her as a powerful leader, but nobody knew the woman behind the iron facade. She had lost not only her husband, but also the emotional connection that came with partnership. Her days were filled with meetings and negotiations, yet each night she returned to an empty house, where the silence echoed louder than the city outside. Amidst this bustling corporate life, one person remained a constant but overlooked presence: Tom, the janitor. Tom had worked for Hawthorne Enterprises for over a decade, yet he was as invisible as the dust he swept away. He wore an old, faded cap that had seen better days and clothes that were perpetually dusty from cleaning the office floors. Tom was friendly but quiet, often engaging in light conversations with employees who barely remembered his name. He didn't mind the anonymity. He enjoyed the simplicity of his work, finding solace in the routine and the quiet corners of the office. But unbeknownst to everyone, Tom had a keen eye for detail. He observed the dynamics in the office, the hurried exchanges, and the subtle shifts in the atmosphere during important meetings. He noticed how the power players wielded their words like weapons, often leaving the untrained ear feeling lost and confused. While he might have been just the janitor, Tom was perceptive, and he had seen much more than anyone realized. One late afternoon, as Tom was finishing up his daily tasks, he noticed Mrs. Lillian standing by the elevator, her expression contemplative. She was deep in thought, a rare sight that intrigued him. She was the epitome of authority, exuding an air of confidence that was both intimidating and inspiring. He had seen her from a distance, but they had never spoken directly. The elevator doors opened, breaking his reverie, and she stepped inside. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Hawthorne," he said, tipping his cap slightly. "Good afternoon, Tom," she replied, her voice warm but laced with an underlying tension. Tom's heart raced. It was unusual for her to acknowledge him, let alone speak his name. He turned back to his cleaning duties, but his mind lingered on her, wondering what could be troubling such a powerful woman. The next day, as Tom was mopping the floors, he heard the sound of high heels approaching. It was Mrs. Lillian again, but this time she wasn't alone. She was accompanied by a group of sharply dressed executives who were discussing numbers and deals, their voices booming as they passed. Tom felt a familiar discomfort as he stood in the corner, invisible amidst the chaos. Then, unexpectedly, Mrs. Lillian stopped. She turned her gaze towards him, and he felt as though the world had paused. "Tom," she said, her tone serious yet kind, "can I speak with you for a moment?" Tom blinked in disbelief. He quickly put down his mop, unsure of what he had done to warrant her attention. "Of course, Mrs. Hawthorne. What can I do for you?" She glanced around, ensuring they had a moment of privacy. "I'd like to ask you for a favor." Tom's heart raced. What could a woman like Mrs. Lillian want from him, a mere janitor? He felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. "Of course, ma'am. What do you need?" She hesitated for a moment, her eyes searching his face as if weighing a heavy decision. "Tomorrow, we have a significant business meeting. I would like you to attend it with me." Tom's mouth dropped open. "Me? But I'm just the janitor. I don't know anything about business meetings. Why would you want me there?" Mrs. Lillian smiled gently, but there was an intensity in her expression that made him feel more important than he ever had. "That's exactly why I need you, Tom. You see things clearly. You're honest, and you have a perspective that's valuable, even if you don't realize it. Tom stood there, stunned. His mind raced. He couldn't fathom why Mrs. Lillian would want him in a meeting filled with corporate power players. "I don't own a suit," he said nervously. "I don't think I belong there." Mrs. Lillian's eyes twinkled with amusement, softening her normally stern demeanor. "Don't worry about the suit. I'm not asking you to speak or present. I need someone I can trust to observe, to be my eyes and ears in that room." Tom felt the weight of her words. Could he really be of help? Deep down, a voice whispered that this could be an opportunity, an unexpected chance to step outside his defined role. After a long moment, he took a deep breath. "All right, Mrs. Hawthorne. I'll do it." Her face lit up with relief and gratitude. "Thank you, Tom. I promise you won't regret this." As she walked away, Tom stood frozen, grappling with the reality of what had just transpired. Tomorrow, he would be stepping into the world of boardrooms and business deals, an unfamiliar territory that felt both thrilling and terrifying. That night, Tom lay in bed, his mind racing. What would he wear? How would he fit in? He had spent years cleaning the same floors that now seemed to shine under the fluorescent lights, and yet here he was, about to enter the inner sanctum of corporate power. The next morning arrived, and Tom dressed in his best clothes, a worn button-down shirt that he hadn't worn in years and his usual work uniform. He looked in the mirror and sighed, feeling out of place even before he arrived at the office. But something inside him urged him forward. When he stepped into the imposing building, he felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. The sleek interiors and polished surfaces only amplified his feelings of inadequacy. Employees rushed past him, their tailored suits and confident strides a stark contrast to his unassuming presence. Tom made his way to the meeting room, anxiety gnawing at him with every step. He could feel the judgmental stares of those who passed him by, and he kept his head down, his heart racing as he approached the large wooden doors of the conference room. With a deep breath, he pushed open the doors, and the room fell silent. All eyes turned towards him, and he felt like a fish out of water. He spotted Mrs. Lillian at the head of the table, her composure unwavering as she regarded him with a slight nod of encouragement. Across from her sat Mr. Blackstone, a tall, imposing figure with slicked back hair and a confident smirk that made Tom's skin crawl. He was flanked by his assistant, a stern-looking woman who scribbled notes with an air of superiority. Tom shuffled behind Mrs. Lillian, unsure of where to position himself. The meeting began, and the tension in the room was palpable. Mr. Blackstone dove into a barrage of numbers and jargon, tossing around terms that made Tom's head spin. As he listened, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Mr. Blackstone's smooth talk felt like a carefully constructed facade, designed to obscure his true intentions. Lillian remained calm, posing questions with precision, her eyes unwavering and focused. Tom watched intently, absorbing the nuances of the conversation. He noted the way Mr. Blackstone leaned back in his chair, oozing confidence as he pressed for the deal. It was clear to Tom that this man was used to getting his way, and Lillian was not falling for it. Then, in a moment that would change everything, Tom's gaze fell on Mr. Blackstone's briefcase. A corner of a paper was visible, tucked just out of sight. His instincts flared, telling him this could be significant. His heart raced as he weighed the possibility of speaking up. What if he was wrong? What if it was nothing? But deep down, Tom felt the weight of responsibility. Mrs. Lillian had put her trust in him, and he couldn't let her down. Taking a deep breath, he spoke up, his voice shaking as he pointed. "Excuse me, but there's a paper under the briefcase that you might want to see." The room fell into an awkward silence. All eyes turned to him, and he felt exposed, as if the air had been sucked from the room. Mr. Blackstone's expression darkened, his confident facade cracking as he glanced down, swiftly covering the paper with his hand. Mrs. Lillian, however, looked at Tom with a mixture of curiosity and appreciation. "What do you mean?" she asked, her tone calm yet demanding. Tom swallowed hard, his heart pounding as he repeated, "I think there's something important there." "Move the briefcase, Blackstone," she commanded, her voice unwavering. Tom held his breath, tension thick in the air as Mr. Blackstone hesitated, then reluctantly slid the briefcase aside, revealing the hidden document beneath. Mrs. Lillian leaned forward, her eyes scanning the page as the atmosphere shifted dramatically. In that moment, Tom realized he had crossed a threshold. The stakes had suddenly become much higher, and his instincts had led him to something far greater than he had ever imagined. The revelation. As the hidden document came into view, the atmosphere in the conference room shifted from tense anticipation to electric shock. Tom stood at the back, heart pounding, acutely aware of the shifting dynamics that had unfolded with his simple act of observation. Mrs. Lillian's calm demeanor contrasted starkly with Mr. Blackstone's rising tension. The room felt as if it were holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable confrontation to unfold. Mrs. Lillian's sharp eyes narrowed as she studied the document. Tom couldn't see what was written on it, but the palpable change in her expression told him everything he needed to know. She had uncovered something significant, something that could very well alter the course of their meeting and the future of her company. "What's this?" she asked, her voice steady, but imbued with authority. Mr. Blackstone shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his earlier confidence evaporating. "I assure you, Mrs. Hawthorne, that document is just an old draft. It has no relevance to our current discussions," he replied, his tone smooth yet defensive, as if trying to regain control over the narrative. Mrs. Lillian held up the document, her voice rising slightly. "This is not just an old draft, Mr. Blackstone. It's an agreement that could hand over the control of Hawthorne Enterprises' most valuable assets to you. Why was it hidden?" Tom felt a rush of adrenaline as he processed her words. He had stumbled upon a hidden agenda, a scheme that could jeopardize everything Mrs. Lillian had built after her husband's death. His heart raced as he wondered what else lay beneath the surface of the business world he had so often observed from the sidelines. Mr. Blackstone's face paled, and his demeanor shifted from calm to frantic. He shot a glance at his assistant, who remained stone-faced, scribbling notes furiously, as if the words on the page might suddenly provide her boss a lifeline. "You must be mistaken," he said, attempting to deflect. "This is an important deal we're negotiating. Surely you wouldn't want to jeopardize that over a minor detail." Mrs. Lillian's expression hardened. "Minor detail? You think I'm going to sign away my husband's legacy based on a hidden agreement? You underestimated my ability to see through your manipulations, Mr. Blackstone." Tom's heart soared as he witnessed Mrs. Lillian's strength. This was not just a battle for the company. It was a confrontation that delved deep into trust, loyalty, and the integrity of their business. He felt a strange sense of pride standing behind her, an unlikely ally in a high-stakes game that was well above his usual pay grade. As tension mounted, Tom decided to take a risk. He stepped forward, his voice steady despite the fluttering in his chest. "I've seen how hard Mrs. Hawthorne works to protect this company. She deserves transparency, not deception. If this document is as you say, Mr. Blackstone, then why was it hidden? What else are you concealing?" The room fell silent again, the eyes of everyone in the meeting fixed on Tom. He could feel the weight of their scrutiny, the unexpected gravity of his words hanging in the air. He hadn't planned to speak up like this, but something about the moment compelled him to defend the woman who had taken a chance on him. Mr. Blackstone's irritation was palpable, his gaze hardening. "How dare you question me, Janitor? You're out of your depth here," he snapped, but his voice lacked the confidence it had earlier possessed. Tom straightened, unperturbed by the insult. "Maybe so, but I'm not afraid to call out wrong when I see it. You're not just trying to deceive Mrs. Hawthorne. You're attempting to rob her of what she's worked her entire life for." Mrs. Lillian turned to Tom, surprise flickering across her face. She had not expected him to speak up, let alone defend her with such conviction. "Thank you, Tom," she said, her voice a mixture of surprise and admiration. "You're absolutely right. I won't let anyone take advantage of me, especially not someone I trusted." Tom felt a surge of adrenaline, the fear dissipating as he realized that his voice mattered. Mrs. Lillian's trust in him fueled his determination, transforming him from an invisible janitor into a crucial player in this unexpected drama. "Let's see this document," she said, looking back at the paper. "What exactly are you trying to hide, Mr. Blackstone?" With a reluctant sigh, Mr. Blackstone leaned forward, clearly rattled. "It's merely a proposal that I thought would benefit both parties. I was going to present it later in the meeting." "Lies," Mrs. Lillian replied sharply. "You thought you could slip it past me without anyone noticing. I've built this company on honesty and integrity, and I won't let anyone derail that for their gain." The tension in the room was electric. Tom watched as the dynamics shifted, sensing a change in the atmosphere. The other executives exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence faltering in the face of Mrs. Lillian's unwavering resolve. Finally, she turned her attention back to the document, scrutinizing every word. Tom stepped back, realizing he had become part of something monumental, something that transcended his role as a janitor. He was witnessing a pivotal moment in business history, the kind that would be discussed long after the meeting had concluded. As Mrs. Lillian continued reading, Tom could sense the undercurrents of anxiety emanating from Mr. Blackstone. He glanced at the other executives, who now appeared less sure of their positions. The aura of authority that had once surrounded Mr. Blackstone was crumbling before their eyes. "I won't sign anything until I have clarity," Mrs. Lillian finally stated, her voice firm. "This meeting is supposed to be about collaboration, not subterfuge. If you can't operate with transparency, I won't do business with you at all." Mr. Blackstone's composure wavered. "You're making a mistake, Lillian. You'll regret this," he warned, but the threat held no weight. His facade was slipping, and he knew it. Tom could feel the room's tension shift as Mrs. Lillian asserted her authority. He had seen how hard she fought for her company, and now he felt a sense of pride in his own contribution to this moment. He had stepped out of the shadows and into the light, standing shoulder to shoulder with the most powerful woman in the room. Mrs. Lillian's focus intensified, and she leaned forward, determination radiating from her. "I built this company with my husband through hard work and honesty. I won't allow you to tarnish that legacy with your lies. If you're truly interested in a partnership, let's discuss it openly. Otherwise, this meeting is over." With those words, she effectively closed the door on Mr. Blackstone's plans. The room fell silent once again, but this time the silence was filled with the promise of a new beginning. Tom felt a swell of hope. Mrs. Lillian had not only defended herself, she had also given him a voice he never knew he had. Standing there, he realized that sometimes even the smallest actions could spark significant change. As the meeting began to wind down, Mrs. Lillian looked over at Tom, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you for your courage, Tom. You helped me see through the fog, and I'm grateful." Tom smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. "I just did what I thought was right," he replied, humbled by her praise. The other executives began to gather their things, visibly shaken by the turn of events. Tom noticed the whispers. Some were expressions of shock, while others seemed to be filled with admiration for Mrs. Lillian's resilience. Once everyone had left the room, Tom and Mrs. Lillian stood alone, the weight of the meeting still hanging in the air. "I never expected this to happen," she said, breaking the silence. "You were brave today, Tom. I didn't just see a janitor. I saw a man of integrity who stood up for what was right. That's something I deeply respect." Tom felt a rush of pride at her words. "I just did what I thought you would do, Mrs. Hawthorne. You taught me the importance of honesty. You're not just a boss. You're an inspiration." She chuckled softly, the tension in the room dissipating as they shared a moment of understanding. "Perhaps it's time we redefine our roles, Tom. You've proven that you have a voice, and I think it's time for you to use it more. Let's find a way for you to contribute beyond cleaning the floors. The thought stunned Tom. He had never imagined being involved in the company's operations in any capacity beyond his janitorial duties. I don't know what I could do, he said, still grappling with the reality of her words. Don't underestimate your perspective, she replied, her voice filled with conviction. You see things differently than those who are entrenched in the corporate world. Sometimes that clarity is what's needed to make the right decisions. Tom pondered her words, realizing she was right. For the first time, he felt as if he had something to contribute, something valuable beyond the confines of his uniform. Mrs. Lillian stood, her expression shifting to one of determination. Let's get you some training. I want you to be part of our next meeting. But this time, not as a janitor, but as someone who has a stake in this company. Tom's heart raced at the thought. It was a leap into the unknown, but it was a chance to redefine not just his role but his life. I'd like that, he said finally, a sense of purpose igniting within him. As they left the conference room together, Tom felt a transformation within himself. He was no longer just the invisible man in the corner. He was becoming a vital part of something much bigger. He glanced at Mrs. Lillian, who walked with a renewed sense of purpose, and he knew that together they could face any challenge that lay ahead. This was just the beginning. With newfound clarity and resolve, Tom stepped into a world he had once thought was beyond his reach, ready to embrace whatever opportunities awaited him. The path ahead might be fraught with challenges, but he was determined to walk it with courage and integrity, just as Mrs. Lillian had taught him. A new beginning. As Tom left the conference room, his heart raced with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. The meeting had transformed him from a mere janitor into a key player in Mrs. Lillian's world, a world that had always seemed too far removed from his humble life. He felt a surge of hope, yet the uncertainty of what lay ahead loomed large in his mind. Mrs. Lillian walked beside him, her demeanor still radiating confidence after the tense confrontation with Mr. Blackstone. She glanced at Tom, her expression thoughtful. I'm serious about involving you more in the company. Your perspective is invaluable, and I believe you can bring a fresh outlook to our operations. Tom nodded, still processing the magnitude of her words. But what could I possibly contribute? He asked, his voice tinged with self-doubt. I've spent my life cleaning floors and emptying trash bins. I don't know anything about running a company. That's where you're mistaken, she replied, her tone encouraging. You've seen the inner workings of this place for years. You've observed how people interact, how decisions are made, and what really matters to our employees. You have insights that could help shape our future. Don't underestimate the value of your experiences. As they walked through the expansive office, Tom took in the surroundings with fresh eyes. The sleek desks, the buzzing atmosphere, the strategic conversations taking place around him. These were the elements of a world he had only glimpsed from the periphery. Now it felt like he was stepping into that world, and with every step, he felt a mix of exhilaration and fear. Let's start by having you join our upcoming strategic planning session, Mrs. Lillian suggested. It's crucial that we reassess our direction after today's incident. Your observations could be key in understanding how to move forward without losing the integrity of our company. Tom's heart raced at the thought. You really want me in a strategic planning session? He asked, barely believing it. Absolutely, she affirmed, stopping to face him. You've earned your place at the table, Tom. I want you to be involved in the discussions and decisions that shape our company's future. Tom couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. Just a day ago, he had been a janitor, invisible to most, and now he was being invited to contribute to the company's strategic vision. What if I don't know what to say? He asked hesitantly. Just be yourself, Mrs. Lillian replied. Listen carefully, share your thoughts when you feel comfortable, and trust your instincts. That's what matters most. You bring a unique perspective that no one else in that room will have. Tom took a deep breath, feeling a flicker of determination spark within him. Okay, I'll do my best. Over the next few days, Tom dedicated himself to preparing for the strategic planning session. He spent his evenings reading about the company's history, its mission, and the challenges it faced in the current market. He even borrowed a few books from the local library about effective communication and business strategies. Each page filled him with a sense of empowerment, igniting a passion he never knew he had. Meanwhile, Mrs. Lillian took the time to mentor him, inviting him to shadow her during meetings and providing insights into her decision-making process. She explained the importance of understanding the bigger picture while also considering the people affected by each decision. During one of their discussions, she asked, "What do you think makes a company truly successful, Tom?" He thought for a moment before responding. "I think it's about more than just profits. It's about people, employees, customers, everyone involved. If a company values its people, it will naturally succeed because those people will be committed to its vision." Mrs. Lillian smiled, clearly impressed. "Exactly. That's the heart of what we do. You've got a keen sense of what matters, and I want you to hold on to that as you enter these meetings." The day of the strategic planning session arrived, and Tom felt a mix of nervousness and excitement as he walked into the conference room. The long table was adorned with papers, laptops, and a massive screen displaying the company's quarterly performance. Mrs. Lillian was already seated at the head of the table, her presence commanding respect as the other executives filtered in. As Tom took his place in a chair that had been set aside for him, he felt the weight of their gazes. Some executives looked at him with a mix of curiosity and skepticism, while others appeared indifferent. Tom clenched his hands together, reminding himself of Mrs. Lillian's words. He belonged here, and he had a voice that mattered. Once everyone was settled, Mrs. Lillian opened the meeting, her tone assertive yet inviting. "Thank you all for coming. Today, we need to reassess our strategic direction and the recent events that transpired in our last meeting with Mr. Blackstone. As you know, integrity is paramount in our business, and we must ensure that our actions reflect our values." Tom listened intently as the executives began discussing their objectives and the challenges they faced. They talked about market trends, potential mergers, and strategies for increasing revenue. As they spoke, he felt the weight of the conversation pressing down on him. This was the world of business he had long observed, but never truly understood. When the discussions began to wane, Tom felt a surge of courage. This was his chance. He raised his hand tentatively, and all eyes turned toward him. "Excuse me," he began, his voice steady despite the butterflies in his stomach. "I've been listening to the discussions about increasing revenue and market share, and I understand those goals are important. But I think we should also consider how our decisions impact our employees and customers. If we lose sight of that, we risk damaging the very foundation of our company." A murmur of surprise rippled through the room. Tom felt a rush of adrenaline as he continued. "I've spent years in this building, watching how employees feel about the changes we implement. I've seen the morale shift when decisions prioritize profits over people. It's crucial we find a balance that respects our values while also achieving our goals." Mrs. Lillian's eyes sparkled with pride as she nodded encouragingly. "Thank you, Tom. That's an excellent point. We can't afford to overlook the human aspect of our business." The executives exchanged glances, some looking impressed while others appeared taken aback. Tom could sense a shift in their attitudes, an acknowledgement that perhaps the janitor had brought something valuable to the table. A senior executive, Mr. Caldwell, cleared his throat. "I must admit, Tom, your insights are refreshing. It's easy to get lost in numbers and projections, but we should remember the people behind those figures." Tom felt a swell of gratitude. His heart raced as he realized he was not just a janitor in that moment. He was a valuable contributor to the company's future. The conversation shifted, and the executives began discussing how they could integrate employee feedback into their decision-making processes, focusing on fostering a more inclusive and supportive workplace culture. The meeting continued, with Tom actively participating whenever he felt he had something to say. He shared ideas about implementing employee wellness programs, encouraging open communication, and prioritizing ethical practices in their business dealings. The executives began to take notes, their initial skepticism replaced with genuine interest. As the session wrapped up, Mrs. Lillian turned to Tom, her face glowing with admiration. "You've done an incredible job today, Tom. Your perspective has brought a new layer to our discussions, and I believe we'll see positive changes because of it." Tom felt a rush of warmth at her words, a sense of belonging he had never experienced before. "Thank you, Mrs. Hawthorne. I'm just glad I could contribute." As the executives filed out of the room, Tom lingered, reflecting on the whirlwind of events. He had not only found his voice, but also made an impact on the company's future. For the first time in his life, he felt as if he were part of something greater than himself. Mrs. Lillian approached him, a proud smile on her face. "This is just the beginning, Tom. I want you to keep sharing your insights and ideas. You have a unique perspective that's invaluable to us." Tom beamed, a mix of excitement and determination flooding his heart. "I will, Mrs. Hawthorne. I want to help however I can." As he left the conference room, he felt lighter than he had in years. No longer just a janitor, he had discovered a newfound purpose. The shadows of doubt that once clouded his mind began to dissipate, replaced by the clarity of his role in shaping the company's future. That evening, Tom sat at his small kitchen table, reflecting on the day's events. He felt a sense of pride in what he had accomplished, and for the first time, he considered the possibilities that lay ahead. Perhaps he could pursue further education in business, or take on additional responsibilities within the company. The world was full of opportunities, and he was ready to seize them. As he sipped his coffee, his phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from Mrs. Lillian, thanking him for his contributions during the meeting. She also suggested they meet weekly to discuss ongoing projects and brainstorm ideas. Tom couldn't believe it. The woman he had admired from afar was now taking an active interest in his growth and development. It felt surreal. Excitement surged through him, propelling him forward into the next chapter of his life. With a newfound sense of purpose and direction, Tom closed his eyes, envisioning the future that awaited him. He was ready to embrace this journey, to step boldly into a world that had once felt so out of reach. With Mrs. Lillian by his side, he felt confident that he could rise to meet the challenges ahead, not just as a janitor, but as a leader in his own right. The path ahead might be uncertain, but Tom knew one thing for sure. He was no longer just a bystander in the story of Hawthorne Enterprises. He was an integral part of its narrative, and he was determined to make his mark. Navigating new waters. As the weeks unfolded, Tom found himself immersed in a world that was both exhilarating and daunting. His relationship with Mrs. Lillian had grown deeper, transitioning from a simple employer-employee dynamic into a mentorship that enriched his life. She began inviting him to more meetings and discussions, each session drawing him further into the fabric of Hawthorne Enterprises. Every Friday afternoon, they would meet in her office, a sleek and modern space overlooking the bustling city. The large windows framed a panoramic view of skyscrapers and streets alive with activity. It was a stark contrast to Tom's previous world, where he had spent his days cleaning those very floors and watching the same skyline from a distance. Now, he sat in that office, discussing strategies and goals, feeling the weight of responsibility settle comfortably on his shoulders. One Friday, as Tom prepared for their meeting, he reflected on how much he had learned in such a short time. He had absorbed the language of business, understanding financial reports, marketing strategies, and operational efficiencies. He was even beginning to feel comfortable sharing his ideas in meetings, contributing to discussions that previously felt far beyond his reach. Mrs. Lillian entered the office with her usual vigor, her expression radiating enthusiasm. "Tom, I'm glad you're here. I have an exciting project for us to discuss today," she said, her voice bright and inviting. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Hawthorne. What's the project?" he asked, his curiosity piqued. She settled into her chair, gesturing for Tom to do the same. "We're planning a community outreach program aimed at improving our corporate social responsibility initiatives. I'd like you to help lead this effort." Tom's eyes widened in surprise. "Me? Lead?" He could hardly believe what he was hearing. "Absolutely. You have a unique perspective on our company's impact on the community," she said. "You know the local environment better than most, having worked here and interacted with various people. I want your insights on how we can contribute meaningfully." Tom felt a rush of adrenaline. This was a different type of challenge, one that combined his newfound knowledge of business with a mission that resonated deeply with him. "That sounds amazing. I'd love to help," he replied, excitement bubbling inside him. Mrs. Lillian smiled, clearly pleased with his response. "Great. We need to think about what initiatives would resonate best with both our employees and the community. I want to create a program that encourages our team to volunteer and gives back in a way that reflects our values as a company." Over the next few weeks, Tom immersed himself in the project. He researched successful outreach programs from other companies, attended community meetings, and engaged with local nonprofits to understand their needs. He was no longer just a janitor. He was a budding leader, and each interaction filled him with purpose. One day, while volunteering at a local food bank, Tom had a breakthrough. He noticed how the food bank relied heavily on volunteers to operate effectively. There was an overwhelming sense of community, with people from all walks of life coming together for a common cause. Inspired by the experience, he formulated an idea to propose to Mrs. Lillian. In their next meeting, Tom eagerly shared his thoughts. "I think we should start a program that encourages our employees to volunteer at local charities and nonprofits. We could give them a few paid volunteer days each year to participate in community service. It would not only benefit those in need but also foster a sense of teamwork and purpose among our employees." Mrs. Lillian listened intently, her expression thoughtful. "That's a brilliant idea, Tom. Giving our employees the opportunity to engage with the community will help strengthen their commitment to the company and enhance our brand's reputation. Let's draft a proposal and present it to the executive team next week." With renewed energy, Tom set to work on the proposal, collaborating closely with Mrs. Lillian. They brainstormed ideas for potential partnerships with local charities, outlined the benefits of community engagement, and discussed how the initiative could align with Hawthorne Enterprises' mission. As they prepared for the presentation, Tom felt a mix of nerves and excitement. He was stepping into a new role that involved not only advocating for the program but also presenting it to the executive team. A far cry from his days spent cleaning the floors. The day of the presentation arrived, and Tom donned his best attire, feeling a sense of purpose in the suit he had borrowed from a friend. As he walked into the conference room, he took a deep breath, reminding himself of how far he had come. The room was filled with the usual faces of the executive team, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Mrs. Lillian stood at the front, her presence commanding attention. "Thank you all for being here today. Tom and I have prepared a proposal for a community outreach program that we believe could have a significant impact on both our employees and the community," she began, her voice steady and assured. Tom stepped forward, feeling the weight of their gazes. "As we know, corporate social responsibility is becoming increasingly important in today's world," he said, trying to steady his voice. "I believe that giving our employees the opportunity to volunteer will not only enhance our brand image, but also foster a stronger sense of community within our organization." As he spoke, Tom felt the fear ebb away, replaced by a sense of conviction. He shared the research he had conducted, highlighting examples of successful volunteer programs from other companies and the positive impact they had on employee morale and engagement. When he finished, he looked around the room, his heart pounding. The executives murmured among themselves, and Tom could see a mix of reactions. Some were nodding in agreement, while others appeared contemplative. Mrs. Lillian took the floor again, reinforcing Tom's points and emphasizing the potential benefits of the initiative. She spoke passionately about the importance of giving back and how it aligned with their company values. After a few moments of discussion, Mr. Caldwell spoke up. "I think this is an excellent idea, but we need to consider the logistics and costs associated with implementing such a program. What will it require from our budget? Tom anticipated this question and had prepared an answer. We could start small, perhaps with a pilot program involving a few departments. The costs would primarily involve paid time off for volunteering. We can measure the program's success and expand it based on employee feedback and participation rates. The room buzzed with conversations, and Tom felt a swell of hope. This was no longer just a proposal. It was a shared vision, one that could redefine their company's identity and strengthen their connection to the community. As the discussion continued, Tom engaged with other executives, answering questions and providing insights. He felt confident and empowered, realizing that his voice mattered just as much as anyone else's in the room. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Mrs. Lillian brought the conversation to a close. "Let's take a vote on moving forward with this initiative," she proposed, her eyes scanning the room. "If we can agree to a pilot program, we can start making a difference in our community and strengthen our employee engagement." With a show of hands, the majority of the executives indicated their support. Tom couldn't believe it. They had done it. He felt a surge of exhilaration, knowing that he had played a pivotal role in this decision. Once the meeting adjourned, Tom and Mrs. Lillian exchanged excited glances. "You were fantastic, Tom. I knew you could do it," she exclaimed, her enthusiasm infectious. "Thank you. I couldn't have done it without your support," he replied, still buzzing from the adrenaline of the moment. Over the next few weeks, they set the wheels in motion for the pilot program. Tom worked closely with HR to develop a framework that would allow employees to participate in community service while maintaining their work commitments. They identified local charities that would benefit from additional support, creating partnerships that resonated with their company's mission. As the program launched, Tom felt a sense of fulfillment he had never experienced before. Employees were enthusiastic about the opportunity to give back, and he witnessed the positive impact on team dynamics. Groups of employees volunteered together, forging new friendships and camaraderie as they worked toward a common goal. One afternoon, Tom joined a group of employees at a local shelter where they helped prepare meals for families in need. The atmosphere was filled with laughter and cooperation, and Tom felt a sense of pride as he watched his colleagues engage with the community. This was the essence of what he had envisioned, a company united in its mission to create positive change. Weeks turned into months, and the pilot program flourished. Employees provided feedback, and Tom gathered insights to refine the initiative further. He created reports that highlighted the successes and challenges they encountered, ensuring that the program was not just a temporary effort, but a lasting commitment. In the midst of this transformation, Tom continued to grow personally and professionally. He enrolled in evening courses to deepen his understanding of business management, eager to further his contributions to Hawthorne Enterprises. He spent nights studying, often reaching out to Mrs. Lillian for guidance, who became not only a mentor, but also a friend. One evening, as Tom sat at his kitchen table surrounded by textbooks and notes, he received a message from Mrs. Lillian inviting him to dinner. Intrigued, he dressed in his best attire and headed to her home, eager to discuss the progress of the outreach program. When he arrived, he was greeted warmly by Mrs. Lillian, who had set the table beautifully. "I thought we could celebrate our success over a nice dinner," she said, her eyes sparkling. As they enjoyed a delicious meal, Tom couldn't help but express his gratitude. "I never imagined I would be in this position, working alongside you and contributing to something meaningful. Thank you for believing in me." Mrs. Lillian smiled, her expression genuine. "You've earned this, Tom. Your hard work and dedication have made a significant impact on our company and the community. I see great potential in you, and I want to continue supporting your growth." They spent the evening discussing future plans for the outreach program, and as the night unfolded, their conversation turned more personal. They talked about their lives, their dreams, and the challenges they had faced. Tom opened up about his past, sharing stories from his childhood and the struggles he had overcome. Mrs. Lillian listened attentively, her empathy shining through. "We all face challenges, Tom. What matters is how we respond to them. Your journey is a testament to your resilience and determination." Tom felt a warmth in her words, a connection that deepened his admiration for her. He realized that Mrs. Lillian was not just a powerful businesswoman. She was also a compassionate individual who understood the importance of uplifting others. As the evening came to a close, Tom felt a sense of fulfillment he had never known before. The path he was on was one of transformation, not just for himself, but for the community they served. He was finally embracing his potential, stepping confidently into a future that once felt out of reach. With every step forward, Tom knew that he was building a legacy, not just as the janitor who cleaned the floors, but as a leader committed to making a difference in the world. With Mrs. Lillian by his side, he felt empowered to navigate the challenges ahead, ready to embrace whatever opportunities lay on the horizon. Their partnership was a reminder that the most unexpected journeys could lead to profound change, and together, they were just getting started, facing adversity. As spring blossomed into summer, Tom and Mrs. Lillian found their community outreach program gaining momentum. The initiative had garnered positive attention from both employees and local media, highlighting Hawthorne Enterprises' commitment to social responsibility. Volunteers flocked to participate, eager to make a tangible impact in their community. For Tom, each day felt like a new opportunity, and he reveled in the role he had carved out for himself within the company. However, as they expanded their outreach efforts, challenges began to surface, testing not only their commitment to the initiative, but also their resolve as leaders. One afternoon, Tom and Mrs. Lillian met in her office to review the program's progress. The walls were adorned with vibrant photographs of employees engaging in various volunteer activities, a testament to their collective impact. "Tom, I'm so proud of what we've accomplished," Mrs. Lillian began, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "But I've been hearing some concerns from our employees about the demands of the program. Some feel overwhelmed with their workload, especially when balancing volunteering with their regular responsibilities." Tom nodded, understanding the pressure many employees faced. "I've noticed that too. Maybe we need to find a better balance. We could introduce a flexible volunteering schedule or offer incentives for participation that don't interfere with their work commitments." "That's a great idea," she replied, making notes. "But there's something else we need to address. I received a call from a local news outlet this morning. They're interested in doing a feature on our program, but I'm worried that they'll focus on any negative feedback we've received instead of the positives." Tom felt a wave of anxiety wash over him. Public perception could be a double-edged sword. We need to control the narrative then. If they're going to cover the program, we should prepare a strong message that highlights our successes and our commitment to improvement. We can't let a few negative comments overshadow the good we're doing. Mrs. Lillian smiled at him, her confidence in his judgment evident. "Exactly. Let's outline the key points we want to convey. We can also invite some of our volunteers to share their experiences. Personal stories will resonate more with the audience." As they brainstormed, Tom felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had learned that challenges were part of the journey, but facing them head-on was what truly mattered. They worked tirelessly over the next few days, drafting a comprehensive plan to present to the media while preparing their volunteers for potential interviews. On the day of the press conference, Tom arrived at the office early, his nerves tingling with anticipation. The conference room was transformed into a welcoming space, adorned with banners showcasing their community outreach achievements. Local journalists began to trickle in, and the atmosphere buzzed with excitement and tension. Mrs. Lillian stood at the front, her posture exuding confidence. Tom took his place beside her, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. As the journalists took their seats, he glanced around the room. Some familiar faces from the executive team were present, all eager to support the program's visibility. "Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today," Mrs. Lillian began, her voice steady. "We're excited to share the progress of our community outreach program and discuss our ongoing commitment to making a positive impact in our community. As she spoke, Tom listened intently, feeling a sense of pride swell within him. This was his chance to shine, to showcase the values they had instilled in the program. After Mrs. Lillian finished her opening remarks, she turned to Tom, inviting him to share his experiences. "Thank you, Mrs. Hawthorne," Tom said, stepping forward, his heart racing. "When we started this program, I had no idea how profoundly it would change not just the community but also our company culture. Seeing my colleagues come together to volunteer has been incredibly inspiring. It reminds us that we're not just employees. We're part of something larger." Tom continued, sharing anecdotes of employees who had been profoundly impacted by their volunteering experiences. He spoke about the bonds formed during community service and how the initiative had created a renewed sense of purpose among employees. The journalists nodded, captivated by his passion and sincerity. As the conference progressed, the journalists asked questions about the program's logistics and its impact on employee morale. Tom felt increasingly confident, articulating the benefits of the program with clarity. However, as he glanced around the room, he noticed one journalist, Mike Jenkins, who sat quietly in the back, a skeptical expression on his face. After a few positive questions, Mike finally raised his hand. "It sounds like a noble effort, but I've heard some negative feedback about the program. Some employees feel that the additional responsibilities are stretching them too thin. How do you respond to those concerns?" The room fell silent, and Tom felt his heart sink. He glanced at Mrs. Lillian, who met his gaze with a reassuring nod. "It's essential to acknowledge feedback, both positive and negative. We understand that some employees feel overwhelmed, and we're committed to finding solutions. Our goal is to create a program that enhances our work culture while respecting everyone's workload," Tom replied, his voice steady. "Do you think your approach is a bit naive? It seems like a classic case of companies wanting to look good on paper while ignoring the real issues at hand," Mike pressed. Tom took a deep breath, refusing to be rattled. "I can't speak for every employee, but I believe that meaningful change takes time and effort. We're listening to feedback and making adjustments. If we genuinely want to make a difference, we have to be willing to adapt and grow along the way." Mrs. Lillian chimed in. "Tom is right. This initiative is a journey, and we're committed to involving our employees in that process. We want to ensure that everyone has a voice and feels supported. That's the core of what we're trying to achieve." The conversation shifted back to more positive topics, and Tom felt a sense of relief wash over him. They had navigated the first challenging question, and he realized that adversity was simply another aspect of their journey. As the press conference wrapped up, several journalists approached Tom, eager to hear more about his experiences and insights. After the conference concluded, Tom stepped out into the sunlight, feeling invigorated yet exhausted. Mrs. Lillian joined him, a proud smile gracing her face. "You handled that beautifully, Tom. I'm impressed with how you addressed the tough questions. You've really grown into this role." "Thank you. I just tried to be honest. I believe in what we're doing," he replied, feeling a mix of gratitude and excitement. As the weeks passed, however, the challenges continued to mount. A few days after the press conference, they received feedback from the employees that stirred concern. Several employees voiced their frustration regarding their workloads, claiming that the additional responsibilities of volunteering were indeed overwhelming. Tom felt the weight of that feedback like a heavy blanket pressing down on him. He had initially thought that the positive energy from the outreach program would carry through, but now he realized that they needed to reassess their approach quickly. He and Mrs. Lillian convened an emergency meeting with the executive team to address the feedback. "We need to listen carefully to our employees' concerns," Mrs. Lillian emphasized, her expression serious. "We can't afford to lose their trust or engagement." Tom nodded in agreement. "Maybe we need to revisit the structure of the program. We could implement a more flexible volunteering schedule or offer different levels of involvement based on each employee's capacity." During the meeting, The executives offered various suggestions. Some proposed creating a dedicated committee to oversee the program's logistics, while others suggested partnering with organizations that could provide volunteer opportunities with less time commitment. Each idea added layers of complexity, but it was clear that they needed a comprehensive strategy to support their employees better. As discussions unfolded, Tom felt a wave of responsibility wash over him. He had helped initiate this program, and now it was crucial to ensure it thrived without causing burnout among employees. What if we held an open forum where employees could share their experiences and suggestions directly? He proposed. Creating a platform for dialogue might help us understand their needs better and foster a sense of community within the program. The room buzzed with chatter as they weighed the suggestion. That could be a great way to engage our employees and show them that we value their input, one of the executives said. By the end of the meeting, they had decided to organize a town hall-style event where employees could share their feedback openly. Tom felt a sense of relief wash over him. They were taking steps to address the issues head-on. The town hall was scheduled for the following week, and anticipation buzzed in the air as employees gathered in the large conference room. Tom stood at the front alongside Mrs. Lillian, who welcomed everyone warmly. "Thank you all for joining us today," she began. "We want to create a space where you can share your experiences with our community outreach program, what you love about it, and where you think we can improve. This initiative is about all of us, and your voices matter." Tom took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders once more. This was his chance to facilitate genuine dialogue between employees and leadership. He had come a long way from the quiet janitor, and he wanted to ensure that everyone felt heard. As employees began to share their thoughts, the atmosphere shifted. Some expressed excitement about the volunteering opportunities and the impact they were making in the community, while others voiced concerns about balancing their workloads with volunteer commitments. One employee mentioned, "I love volunteering, but sometimes it feels like too much on top of my daily tasks. I want to give back, but I need to manage my time better." Tom nodded in understanding, taking mental notes of the recurring themes. "Thank you for sharing that. We want this program to enhance your experience, not overwhelm you," he replied, encouraging further discussion. Another employee raised their hand. "Could we have different levels of involvement? Some of us may want to volunteer more regularly, while others might prefer to contribute a few times a year." "That's a fantastic idea," Mrs. Lillian chimed in. "We can explore offering a variety of volunteer opportunities that cater to different interests and availability." As the discussions continued, Tom felt a sense of unity building among the employees. They were not just voicing their concerns, they were collaborating on solutions together. The atmosphere shifted from uncertainty to empowerment, and Tom couldn't help but feel proud of what they were creating. By the end of the town hall, they had gathered a wealth of feedback and ideas. Tom and Mrs. Lillian thanked everyone for their openness and assured them that their input would be taken seriously. As employees began to leave, Tom felt a sense of accomplishment wash over him. The next steps involved implementing the suggestions gathered from the town hall. Tom worked closely with Mrs. Lillian to refine the outreach program, introducing flexibility and offering a wider array of volunteer opportunities. They created a volunteer calendar, highlighting events that catered to different schedules, ensuring that every employee could participate in a way that felt manageable. As the program evolved, the feedback from employees shifted. They felt more empowered and engaged, and the sense of camaraderie within the company grew stronger. Tom watched as colleagues formed bonds during volunteer activities, and he realized that their mission was truly taking shape. One afternoon, as Tom reflected on the progress they had made, he received a call from Mrs. Lillian. "I have some exciting news," she said, her voice filled with enthusiasm. "We've been nominated for a local community service award. The nomination is a recognition of our outreach program and the positive impact we've made in the community." Tom's heart swelled with pride. "That's incredible. I can't believe how far we've come." As the award ceremony approached, the entire office buzzed with excitement. Employees shared stories of their volunteering experiences, and anticipation filled the air. The event was scheduled for a Friday evening, and Tom was invited to attend alongside Mrs. Lillian and the executive team. On the night of the ceremony, Tom dressed in his best attire, feeling a mix of nerves and excitement. As they arrived at the venue, a beautiful hall adorned with twinkling lights, he was struck by the atmosphere of celebration. Local businesses, community leaders, and volunteers filled the room, all gathered to honor the impact of community service. Tom felt a rush of gratitude as he mingled with familiar faces. He chatted with employees he had worked alongside, sharing stories of their volunteering experiences. The atmosphere was electric, and he couldn't help but feel proud of what they had accomplished together. When it was time for the award ceremony to begin, Tom stood alongside Mrs. Lillian and the executive team. The host welcomed everyone and began announcing the nominees for the Community Service Award. Tom's heart raced as the finalists were revealed. And the award for Outstanding Community Service goes to... The host paused for dramatic effect. Hawthorne Enterprises. The room erupted in applause, and Tom felt a surge of excitement. They had done it. They had made a difference, and the recognition was a testament to their hard work and commitment to the community. Mrs. Lillian stepped forward to accept the award, her expression beaming with pride. "Thank you all so much for this honor," she began, her voice steady yet filled with emotion. "This award represents the collective efforts of everyone at Hawthorne Enterprises. Our community outreach program is a reflection of our values, and I am proud to work alongside such dedicated individuals." As she spoke, Tom felt a swell of pride wash over him. This moment was a celebration of their journey, a journey that had transformed him from an invisible janitor into a respected leader within the company. After the ceremony, as employees celebrated, Tom found a quiet moment to reflect on how far he had come. He realized that this journey was about more than just the community outreach program. It was about discovering his own potential and embracing the possibilities that lay ahead. As he looked around the room, watching his colleagues celebrate their success, Tom knew one thing for certain: they were just getting started. The challenges they had faced had only strengthened their resolve, and the recognition they received was merely the beginning of a larger commitment to making a difference. With renewed determination, Tom felt ready to navigate whatever lay ahead, knowing that together with Mrs. Lillian and the team, they could achieve great things. The journey had transformed him, and now he was prepared to embrace the future, one filled with endless possibilities and the promise of change. Embracing the future. The award ceremony marked a turning point for Tom and Mrs. Lillian. The recognition for their community outreach program not only validated their efforts, but also ignited a spark of ambition within the company. Over the following months, they expanded their outreach initiatives, connecting with even more organizations and amplifying their impact in the community. The atmosphere at Hawthorne Enterprises buzzed with newfound energy. Employees felt a renewed sense of purpose, and Tom watched as collaboration flourished across departments. The culture was shifting. People were no longer just coworkers, but a community united by a shared mission. Tom's role continued to evolve. After the award ceremony, Mrs. Lillian approached him with an idea. "I want you to lead a team dedicated to exploring new partnerships with local nonprofits. We can expand our reach and deepen our involvement in the community," she proposed. Tom felt a rush of exhilaration. "Really? You want me to lead a team?" His disbelief was palpable. "Absolutely," she affirmed. "You've shown great leadership skills, and I believe you can inspire others to contribute to our mission. We need someone who understands the heart of our outreach efforts, and you are that person." With Mrs. Lillian's encouragement, Tom began assembling a diverse team of employees from various departments, all passionate about community service. Together, they brainstormed new initiatives, from mentorship programs for local youth to environmental sustainability projects aimed at improving the city's green spaces. One idea that resonated deeply with Tom was the creation of a Hawthorne Day of Service, an annual event where employees could volunteer en masse for various community projects. The vision was to mobilize the entire company, making a significant impact in a single day while fostering teamwork and camaraderie among employees. Tom presented the idea to Mrs. Lillian, who was enthusiastic. "This is brilliant. Let's make it happen. We can partner with local organizations to identify projects that need our help," she said, her eyes gleaming with excitement. They spent weeks planning the event, coordinating with local nonprofits and organizing logistics. The enthusiasm within the company grew as the date approached. Tom created promotional materials and set up a registration system, encouraging employees to sign up for projects that aligned with their interests. On the day of the event, the energy in the office was electric. Employees arrived early, wearing Hawthorne-branded T-shirts and ready to make a difference. Tom felt a swell of pride as he looked around, seeing familiar faces and new ones alike, all eager to contribute. As they gathered for a brief kickoff meeting, Mrs. Lillian addressed the crowd. "Today, we're not just employees. We're a force for good in our community. I want to thank each of you for being here and for your commitment to making a positive impact. Let's show our community a heart of Hawthorne Enterprises." Cheers erupted from the crowd, and Tom felt a rush of motivation course through him. This was what it was all about, coming together to create change. The teams dispersed, and Tom found himself at a local park, where they were set to clean up litter, plant trees, and revitalize the green space for the community. As he worked alongside his colleagues, he saw firsthand how their efforts transformed the area. They laughed, shared stories, and bonded over their shared purpose. By the end of the day, the park looked revitalized, filled with new plants and a palpable sense of community spirit. Tom felt a deep sense of fulfillment as he surveyed the work they had accomplished. It was more than just physical labor. It was a demonstration of what Hawthorne Enterprises stood for, a commitment to giving back and supporting the community. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the park, Tom gathered everyone together to reflect on the day's accomplishments. "Today, we made a real difference," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "This is just the beginning. Let's carry this spirit of service into our everyday work and continue to find ways to support our community." The team cheered, and Tom knew that they had sparked something special, a culture of service that would extend beyond this day. It was a movement that would redefine their identity as a company and as individuals. In the weeks that followed, the success of the Day of Service rippled through the community. Local media covered the event, highlighting the positive impact Hawthorne Enterprises was making. Employees felt proud to be part of an organization that valued social responsibility, and the camaraderie built during the event spilled over into the workplace. However, as the momentum built, Tom faced new challenges. While the outreach program flourished, some employees began to voice concerns about balancing their newfound commitment to volunteering with their regular workloads. Tom felt a pang of anxiety. He had worked hard to create a culture of engagement, and he didn't want to see that spirit wane. He approached Mrs. Lillian to discuss the feedback. "I think we need to find a way to ensure that volunteering doesn't become an added burden for employees. We want them to feel empowered, not overwhelmed," he said. "I completely agree," she replied, her brow furrowed in thought. "We need to be proactive in addressing these concerns. Let's schedule a meeting with the team to openly discuss their experiences and gather feedback on how we can better support them." Together, they organized a feedback session, inviting employees to share their thoughts on the outreach program. The atmosphere in the room was one of camaraderie and collaboration, with employees eager to contribute to the conversation. During the session, Tom listened intently as colleagues shared their perspectives. Some expressed excitement about the impact they were making, while others voiced concerns about balancing their regular responsibilities with their desire to volunteer. One employee raised their hand. "I love being part of this program, but I feel like my regular workload has increased since we started. I want to help, but I also don't want to fall behind on my tasks." Another added, "Could we create designated time blocks for volunteering during work hours?" That way, it doesn't feel like we're taking time away from our regular responsibilities. Tom took notes, absorbing every suggestion. Thank you for sharing your experiences. We want to ensure that this program enhances your work life, not complicate it. I'll work with Mrs. Lillian to explore ways we can integrate volunteering into our schedules more effectively. The meeting concluded with a sense of optimism. Tom felt grateful to work in an environment that prioritized employee feedback, where collaboration and open communication were valued. After the session, Tom met with Mrs. Lillian to discuss the feedback. I think we need to establish a more structured approach to volunteering, he suggested. We could implement designated volunteer hours and create a balance between outreach and daily responsibilities. I like that idea, Mrs. Lillian replied, her expression thoughtful. Let's draft a proposal outlining these changes and present it to the executive team. We want to ensure our employees feel supported while still engaging in meaningful service. Over the next few weeks, they worked diligently to refine their approach. The executive team embraced their proposal, and they established designated volunteer hours that allowed employees to participate without feeling overwhelmed. As the program evolved, Tom witnessed a shift in employee engagement. People began to approach him with ideas for new initiatives and ways to enhance their outreach efforts. The culture of service had taken root, and he felt a sense of pride in having been part of that transformation. One afternoon, as Tom prepared for another outreach initiative, he received an unexpected call from a local television station. They were interested in doing a feature story on Hawthorne Enterprises' community outreach program, particularly highlighting Tom's role in its development. Excitement and nervousness washed over him. This was another opportunity to share their message with the community and inspire others to get involved. Tom agreed to participate, knowing that the exposure could further strengthen their efforts. The following week, a film crew arrived at the office, setting up equipment and preparing for the interview. Tom stood in front of the cameras, feeling a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. He had come a long way from the janitor who once cleaned the floors. Now he was about to share his story with the world. The host of the show introduced him, and as the camera focused on him, he took a deep breath. Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here to talk about our community outreach program and the impact it's making. As he spoke about the program's success, the importance of community service, and the partnerships they had forged, he felt empowered. He shared anecdotes of employees who had found fulfillment through volunteering and emphasized how the initiative had transformed the company culture. The segment aired a few days later, and the response was overwhelming. Emails flooded in from local residents, expressing admiration for the program and interest in getting involved. Tom couldn't help but smile as he read the messages, knowing that their efforts were resonating beyond the walls of the company. Inspired by the attention, Mrs. Lillian and Tom organized an open house event at the office to invite community members to learn more about their outreach initiatives and explore opportunities to collaborate. The event drew a large crowd, filled with local residents eager to connect with Hawthorne Enterprises and discover ways to make a difference. As Tom interacted with community members, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This was the culmination of their hard work, a gathering of individuals united by a shared purpose. He watched as employees mingled with community members, exchanging ideas and forging new connections. At one point, Tom found himself speaking with a local high school student named Maya, who expressed interest in community service. "I want to get involved, but I'm not sure where to start," she said, her enthusiasm palpable. Tom smiled, recalling his own journey. Getting involved can be as simple as volunteering a few hours at a local organization or even starting your own project. What are you passionate about? "I love working with kids and organizing events," Maya replied. "I was thinking of starting a tutoring program for younger students." "That's a fantastic idea," Tom said, feeling inspired by her initiative. "You could partner with local schools to find students who need help. If you'd like, I can connect you with our outreach team to help you get started." As they exchanged contact information, Tom realized that this was precisely what he had hoped to achieve with the outreach program: empowering individuals to take initiative and create change within their own communities. As the open house event came to a close, Tom felt a sense of gratitude wash over him. He looked around the room, seeing employees and community members engaged in meaningful conversations, sharing ideas, and forming connections that could lead to future collaborations. Later that evening, Tom met with Mrs. Lillian to reflect on the day. "Today was incredible. I didn't realize how much impact we could have just by opening our doors and inviting the community in," he said, his heart full. Mrs. Lillian nodded, her expression proud. "You've played a significant role in making this happen, Tom. Your vision for community engagement has transformed our company's identity. I'm excited to see where this journey takes us." As the days turned into weeks, Tom felt a sense of purpose and belonging that he had never experienced before. He was no longer just a janitor. He was a leader and an advocate for positive change. However, as their outreach program flourished, Tom faced an unexpected challenge. One afternoon, he received a phone call from a local nonprofit organization expressing concerns about a recent collaboration. They had encountered issues with volunteer turnout and were struggling to meet their needs. Tom felt a pang of anxiety. "We can't let them down," he said to Mrs. Lillian as they discussed the situation. "We need to find a way to support them and ensure their projects succeed." "I agree," Mrs. Lillian replied, her expression serious. "Let's arrange a meeting with them to understand their needs better and see how we can help." Together, they met with the nonprofit's leadership team, listening to their challenges and exploring solutions. Tom felt a renewed sense of determination as they brainstormed ideas to increase volunteer engagement and support the organization's mission. After the meeting, they implemented strategies to mobilize their employees, focusing on building excitement around upcoming volunteer opportunities. They utilized internal communication channels, highlighting the positive impact their volunteering would have on the nonprofit's projects and encouraging employees to participate. As they worked to strengthen the partnership, Tom felt a sense of camaraderie growing within the company. Employees rallied together, eager to contribute and support the community, and the spirit of service became deeply ingrained in the culture of Hawthorne Enterprises. Reflecting on the journey, Tom marveled at how far he had come. He had transformed not only himself, but also the culture of the company. The outreach program had become a cornerstone of their identity, fostering connections and inspiring employees to make a difference. One evening, as he sat on his porch, Tom gazed out at the stars, reflecting on the path he had taken. He remembered the lonely nights after his husband's passing, when the weight of isolation felt unbearable. Now he was surrounded by a vibrant community, bound by a shared purpose and the belief that together they could create change. With every challenge they faced, he felt more equipped to navigate the complexities of leadership. His confidence had grown, and he was determined to continue advocating for meaningful change, both within the company and in the broader community. As he closed his eyes, Tom envisioned the future, one filled with opportunities to inspire others and cultivate a culture of service that would endure. He was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, knowing that the journey had only just begun. Together with Mrs. Lillian and his dedicated team, he felt empowered to create a lasting legacy, one that would leave an indelible mark on the community and beyond. The next chapter of their journey awaited, and Tom was ready to step into it with unwavering determination and an open heart.